Alright, so now let's go over what happens with a heat press. Now, every heat press, I don't care what brand you buy, will always be wrong when you set your temperature. I just reset mine to 400 degrees, and the reason why I did that is so I could show you how to figure out what your fudge factor is going to be. On this heat press right now is 0.92. Is that exact every time? I just proved to myself that yeah, no, it wasn't correct, but it's close. When you set your press to 400 degrees, it's either going to be above 400, it's going to be a lot below 400. So you got to figure out how to figure out the fudge factor for your heat press. And this is really important because if they're saying you need to press something at 400 degrees, you need to know on your press what's going to make 400 degrees be 400 degrees. Like I say, this one, it's never right. I had one that was so far off. Actually, I still got it on my trailer, where that thing was 0.75 fudge factor, which meant if I set it for 400 degrees and I wanted to pull out 400 degrees on that press, I actually had set the temperature down to 300 degrees to reach that 400 degrees. You take 400, you multiply it times 0.75, it says, okay, set it for 300, now you got the right number. How do you figure out the fudge factor? I'm going to let this one finish heating up, and I'll come back and we'll go over it. Well, actually it's at 400 right now. We don't need to wait, it's ready to go. Let me change the angle of the camera and let's talk about this one for a bit. How does it work? What do you got to do? I want to pick the camera up because it doesn't show you the temp. Well, no, actually, I just lowered the press. Alright, if you can see this says it's 400 degrees right now. Alright, that's what it says. It says it's 400 degrees. Alright, how do you know it's 400 degrees? Well, you get yourself one of these laser sensors. You aim it towards the center of the heat platen on the bottom. This one's reading about 425. Okay, 425. All right, that's good. Yeah, now we know where we're at. It actually raised back up. It went a little higher than 400 degrees, but it went to 425. All right, so now what we do is we just reach over. Actually, I can't reach over because I don't have a portable calculator with me. We'll go to this one. I'll edit that part out. Alright, so here we go. We have 400 degrees, and then we divide it by 425. I have a 0.94 many numbers behind it is a fudge factor. So if I actually want that press to run 400 degrees, I have to take it and go 400, and then I multiply that times 0.94. I've set my press to 376 degrees. Now if you can see that on the video, I don't know, maybe you can, maybe you can't. But I've set my press to 376 degrees. So what did I set my press at when we were doing all these other tests? I'll edit that part out too. So why was I running my press at 370 degrees or whatever, that was 368 that I was doing, was because that was the 400 degrees that I was, my game point was. You will always have a heat press that will not read properly. It says, yeah, it's 400 degrees, but as I just showed you with the laser temperature gauge, non-touch, it's not. It's always going to give you that fudge factor. So you just take what you set it at, and you point one of these laser guns at it, and it says, okay, this is what it's really at, and you divide it by that number, and that tells you what your fudge factor is going to be. Now, I actually have on my heat presses labels to tell me you got to multiply it by 0.92 temperature desired times by this number. You can't get 400 degrees on the heat press by setting it for 400 degrees. They never work that way. Ever. I don't know how many heat presses I played with. Now my hat press is exactly the temperature that I set it for. That's probably the only one that's ever been that way. My other heat press, oh my god, that thing was like 0.65, I think it was. It was terrible. But it only heated in the center of the platen. It never heated to the outside edges. So the heat press was saying, yeah, I can get to this temperature here based on where you're pointing it at, but the rest of it doesn't ever get hot. So when you do it, you got to test it in the center. You got to test all your outside edges. And then take a happy medium between all of them, which means that you got 5 points that you're testing. You got the center point, you got all 4 corners. Those are your other points. You get 5 points. You come up with an average between all 5 of those points. And then you say, what is the temperature running at compared to what I wanted it to be at? You take that average and you divide it by the 400 you wanted to be. And that gives you your coefficient to be able to say, okay, this is my fudge factor number. For me, it's 0.93, 0.94, anywhere, 92. That gives you your fudge factor. So you take your temperature that you really want to be at, and you multiply it times that number, and whatever you set your temperature at will give you your fudge factor real number to get you into that range. People don't talk about fudge factors on any of these videos for heat presses, and it's really important that you figure out what your heat press fudge factor is. I'm going to shut this one down because this is like really hot and it's burning my shoulder. But what you do is you set your heat press. You say, I want to be 400 degrees. You set it at 400 degrees. You take a temperature reading of all 5 points. You got to do center. You got to do each outside corner. You take all 5 of those numbers, you add them together, you divide it by the 5. That gives you your average between those 5. And then you say, but that's not what I was shooting for. So it was like all those numbers added together, divided by the 400 you want, gives you your fudge factor. And then every time you set your press, you want to go whatever it is. If you say it's 400, for me, it turns out to be 0.92 to 0.94. You take that number 400, you multiply it times to 0.92 or 0.94, whatever you want to be. That's your fudge factor, and that's what you set your press at to get to your 400 degrees. People don't talk about this stuff, but they should, because they know there's not a single heat press on the market that does exactly what it says. If you put it up to 400 degrees, now in my case, at 400 degrees, it was scorching shirts. And that's how I knew something was wrong. And I was like, yeah, well, what was wrong? Well, it was that this number is reading a lot lower than what the actual was. And the actual it'll scorch the shirt, but the real number won't. So you multiply your real number that you want by your fudge factor, and that gives you the temperature you want to be at, and now you can't scorch a shirt. It's as easy as that. Print it out. Put it as a label like I did. Put it on your press so that every time you go to set your press, you know that if it's like you want to press at 375, you multiply it times the 0.92 or 0.94, whatever it is, you'll always come back to the same degrees that you wanted to be. Yeah, it's a pain in the neck, but you have to do it, because otherwise you're going to be burning up all your garments. I've done it. Oh my God, I burn up this like little 2T garment that was cute as a button on a pre-press. I didn't even get the print on the press. I burn it up on the pre-process. Just get rid of the moisture. And it turned it brown. It was white. So you need to use the fudge factor. You need to learn how to use the fudge factor, and there you go. I just showed you how to make up how to come up with your fudge factor. That's very important. Y'all have a good night.